Hey everyone, and welcome to the Goblin Hideout, the NFT Finance Podcast. I'm Helmas and joined by my co-host Terry. Today we have Spice Finance. Hey, thanks for joining, guys. And maybe let's just start it off where, you guys can provide a little introduction on Spice, introduction on yourselves, and we can kick it off that way.
Thank you guys for having us. My name's Jacob. On Twitter, I'm at @Uguay_DeFi. In terms of my role on the project, I'm one of the co-founders, CEO. Prior to starting Spice Finance, I was one of the early policy and treasury team members over at Olympus DAO. Some of you may recognize the name. So I kind of helped come up with a lot of the monetary policy designs there and treasury management. And then before that, I used to work in investment banking. So something a little bit more of the TradFi angle.
I'm Dylan. On Twitter, I'm at Dylan DUYVU. I'm the CEO and co-founder here at Spice. So I actually come from a hard science background, so something a little bit more non-traditional. I did battery research at both Harvard and Cornell, and I dropped out of UC Berkeley's PhD program, to work with both Jacob and Nids on Spice. Played around at DeFi for the past year or so, and excited to dive in as a builder.
What's up, guys? I'm Niat. Yeah, I went to UCLA. I did AI research there while working on some Ethereum projects that hit 9-figure market caps at their peak. So that was really interesting and kind of got me in the door of Ethereum programming. I also built an AI company that basically analyzed music tastes. That's in the process of recently selling. I worked at Northrop Grumman doing distributed reinforcement learning, which is this type of AI. Worked on my Stanford master's program to work on Spice with these guys after recognizing the opportunity here.
First question to kick it off is, how did you guys all meet?
We actually all went to high school together back in the day. We kind of all met there. I think Dylan and Niat used to swim together. So that's really where the connection comes from. And Dylan and I, had been really good friends from very early high school, even late middle school or so.
Yeah, so Jacob and I kind of started, tossing the idea of working for ourselves sometime in late 2020. And we just kind of echo chambered each other into starting up. And we were looking for a technical guy on our team. And that's when Niad kind of came to mind. LinkedIn DM'd him, had a 4-hour conversation / interview with him of sorts, I guess. We kind of all realized that we had come to the same moment in our lives at the same time. And from there, we kind of just all came in with the same perspective and the same heads on our shoulders. So it was just a perfect fit.
I guess at a high level, what's kind of the vision for Spice? And maybe is there a story behind the name, who came up with the name and stuff like that?
Just for kind of clarity's sake, so Spice Finance is an aggregator and liquidity routing protocol for NFT lending marketplaces, kind of playing in the space between DeFi NFTs, NFT Finance. In terms of where we came up with the name, I think we're having a few brainstorming sessions, and we really wanted to kind of tap into some kind of historical metics. That's something we thought Olympus DAO did pretty well. When you hear about Olympus, the founder's name is Zeus. It really sticks with people, makes the marketing a lot easier. And so when we were thinking about names, we wanted to have a name that throws back to maybe some kind of trading market or some kind of historical marketplace. The first idea was actually to come up with the name Bazaar. Turns out a lot of people struggle to spell the word bizarre and also don't know if it's bizarre as in a place or bizarre as in weird. So the next kind of best idea was Bazaar. There are a lot of spice markets. Those are historical kind of connotation there with worldwide trade. And so Spice Finance was really where we stuck it.
Yeah, we also knew that narrative building in DeFi was super important, not only for communities, the community building sake, and also to Jacob's point, having a more mimetic story and something that can last long term. So we just saw the potential for a whole kind of lore and even potential to kind of hop into gamification with this kind of theme in bazaars and spice and trading and all that stuff around it.
I thought maybe it would have been a Dune reference. I wonder how many people come up to you guys saying, is this spice trading in Dune? Terry, maybe you want to jump in and maybe ask some protocol questions?
Yeah, I guess taking it from Ryan, if any of you guys could just give us and our listeners just a general overview of how does Spice work?
Our long-term vision for Spice is really to become a simplification layer on top of NFT finance protocols. But initially, we're starting with yield aggregators, so something similar to Year in Finance. What we really want to do is give individuals the opportunity to hop on our platform. Let's say you have some set amount of capital and there's kind of like a risk threshold. Maybe you want to be exposed to low risk, medium risk, high risk. You deposit capital on our protocol, and then we automatically route it to the best risk-adjusted lending pools, trying to minimize risk on your end, as well as just maximize return across the various NFT lending marketplaces.
How do you guys deal with different mechanisms, right? Because like right now, P2B marketplaces are kind of the dominant force, and most of the buy-side demand exists on P2B platforms. But like my understanding is that it's kind of difficult to automatically route depositors' liquidity that way.
So initially, we're starting with the P2Pool space, just far more composable. And we think it's probably going to be for long-term NFT finance and lending markets, especially for the collections and more interchangeable NFTs, probably going to be the dominant lending design. That just has to do with the fact that P2Pool kind of provides individuals with that instant liquidity, makes the process a little bit easier. So we're starting with P2Pool marketplaces and then slowly kind of moving into more complex designs over time. The P2P space is not one we've come up with a design mechanism as of yet, but there are a few options that may exist down the line. The first is allocate capital to investment DAOs that are kind of building on top of P2P marketplaces. There's also an opportunity to create a pool system that buys loans, secondary loans off of P2P marketplaces. So let's say individuals kind of capture or individuals enter into loans on P2P marketplaces, and then maybe they'd have the opportunity to sell those loans back to us, and then we'll take over control and give them some kind of arbitrage. So that's another method we could use to aggregate the P2P marketplaces. That's kind of further down the line in development on our end.
Would that be like purchasing promissory notes?
Something like that, yes.
Just going back to, Jacob, your original sort of answer, you said that the way you see these aggregators working is that you have a set amount of capital and you have a risk threshold, and you can deposit capital into a protocol and it's sort of automatically routed to like risk adjusted pools. Are you sort of insinuating that the way you guys see this happening is, you have like a risk tolerance and then you therefore have like sort of tranching mechanism where you can route to different pools, and like would you guys assess that risk?
That's about right. We're effectively creating like dynamic credit portfolios. We're trying to take some TradFi concepts into NFT lending. It's not really a one-to-one match, and the products themselves are a little bit different. We kind of see NFT loans as almost exotic credit instruments. So we're creating a dynamic credit portfolio. Then for any level of risk, we have like internal specifications for that. Let's say we don't want to lose, worst case scenario, you lose 1% of the portfolio. You're 99% confident of that. That could be a risk threshold. And then for that risk threshold, we try to find the loan pools as well as the loans on the market that will maximize your returns.
How would you guys deal with default?
Liquidation is something we kind of build into the design of both the credit portfolio. I think on the mathematical end, we have an appraisal tool that gives us an idea of, in the case of a default, what do these NFTs actually sell for? So that gives us a little bit of an idea of what the expected value of any given loan is. And the benefit of working at the moment with the P2Pool marketplaces is they generally have auction systems for loan defaults. And so those are pretty easy to implement into the platform. You're effectively just, in the case of a default, if there's some kind of liquidation premium or whatnot, actually boosting returns. But we are modeling situations where there is some kind of flash crash, maybe some kind of jump in NFT prices, and defaults actually lose the portfolio money. In which case, that's something that's being dynamically adjusted for. And that's the risk adjusted portion that's really going into our analysis of what loans to send to.
That part is super interesting, right? Because at least to my understanding, a lot of these peer-to-pool protocols, the way they differentiate themselves is they lend against certain assets, right? Like most are on a whitelist. Some only act on a very select number of assets. Some act on a wider range of assets. You guys are sort of thinking about measuring volatility of various assets in these peer-to-pool protocols and then putting on a risk-adjusted factor into yields based on that?
That's exactly right. Another thing that we're also doing is just across the loan pools, we're trying to minimize correlations between different loans and collections. That's something that's quite important as you start moving into creating a larger and larger portfolio that has a lot of different NFT collections, different NFTs and loans. You have to be kind of aware of the fact that if a certain NFT collection, let's say there are defaults happening, the probability of other collections having defaults as well increases. And so you want to kind of allocate capital in such a way that you're minimizing those correlations. during those worst case scenarios.
Have you guys seen NFT portfolios that are heavily non-correlated? Because, I can't imagine that at this point there would be sort of baskets of NFTs that are like heavily non-correlated.
They're all fairly correlated with each other. Like if you go toward the Bored Ape Yacht Club type community, you have Mutant Apes and the other side and whatnot. Those tend to be more correlated with each other. There are NFT collections that are less correlated, I would say, like CryptoPunks and Bored Apes seem to have lower correlations than some others.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And then going back to your sort of like original, what you said about, reflecting the whitelisted assets into your risk premium, like what does the mathematics look like there?
On the back end, how we're doing this is we're trying to find an expected value of any given loan. And the way you're able to do that is you have some kind of probability of default, and you also have the probability that an asset does not default. The probability default is going to be a function of the volatility of the underlying assets, as well as the liquidation threshold and what kind of loan is taken out. That really helps us kind of get an understanding of what is the actual risk profile without tagging into returns. After we have a risk profile of probabilities of defaults and whatnot, we're able to kind of get an idea of, all right, in the case of a default, what are you actually getting for this? In the case of not getting a default, you're usually just getting the actual interest on the loan. And that helps us build out less of like the stated loan that the NFT lending platforms tell us we're getting, and something that it makes more internal sense as to what you're actually paying for. On our back end, what we're actually doing is pricing these loans. We found that a lot of these loans are generally mispriced. And so that kind of presents us with an opportunity to get that alpha while also providing suffocation for users.
I was going to ask you guys about the appraisal system, but now it kind of makes sense, like why you guys have the system. But I do want to sort of put that off for later. And then it seems like when you guys are pricing the loans, it's basically looking at past historical volatility, looking at the current price or looking at whatever appraised price you guys have, and then looking at sort of the expected value by looking at sort of percentage possibility that this will default, percentage possibility that it will not, and then APR if so. And then looking at that expected value and then sort of trying to establish loans at, or like trying to look at protocols that are providing loans at or near that expected value. Is that sort of like a fair assessment?
Yes.
As far as like data collection goes, I'd be curious where you guys are collecting data. Are you looking both like primary and secondary sources? Just curious about like the data collection process behind that.
But basically for the data collection, we're mostly looking at primary sources, aka the blockchain. So for most of the protocols we're aggregating, we're literally just reading blockchain transactions and reconstructing the collateralized NFT and then the loan or the amount of money that's borrowed against that NFT, so we can assess how likely that borrower is to default.
And then have you guys started thinking about the tokenomics side of things yet?
Yeah, so I think with regards to tokenomics, we have a high-level understanding and philosophy of the direction we want to go. I think that with the nature of our protocol, it's not necessary to decentralize. I know that may be a controversial take because it's very much almost like a SaaS tool for retail. These people who may not want to go through the efforts of analyzing the risk as well as the APRs across all the various loans and all the various marketplaces come to us. And then we essentially just provide them with the service, routing their capital and returning them yield. All of us on the founding team have a high level philosophy that progressive decentralization is probably the best way to operate any kind of DeFi protocol / business. Reason being is just because in general, I think that it takes a somewhat authoritarian effort to 0 to 1 technology initially. That's due to just like a combination of keeping the team relatively lean such that you can have the agility to adjust the market as well as the talent within the team as a whole to get the thing off the ground. And then over time, you have more and more people use the protocol, and the protocol at the end of the day is in service to the users. It makes sense to decentralize such that the needs and the wants of the users can be represented over time. All of the details in this are currently getting worked out amongst our team in the back end. This is just like high level where we see the direction of our business going long term, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Absolutely. And sort of going back to the protocol design, like I saw that you guys had an appraisal system. How does this work within the context of the rest of the product suite? And insofar as you can share, I know you guys have like a very, very accurate appraisal system where you guys have sort of the absolute percentage error down to less than 5%, I think I recall. How do you guys achieve this?
The appraisal system We're basically, I think the 2 points of it that I can give away are that one, we're using machine learning rather than deep learning, just because there's not enough data for deep learning architectures to truly learn something meaningful. And the second thing is the market is constantly changing. The distribution of inputs is changing, and also the function of mapping an NFT to its price is constantly changing. Our key insight here was to really use an ensemble of models, not just one at any time, and then you hope that it performs better in the current market situation. You really use like 10 to 20 different models, and you basically aggregate them together by either averaging or taking the median of their outputs. And this gives you a much lower percent error than just using one model, because you're basically way more adaptable to any market condition. After you have that, you can really use the appraisal system to get an accurate price of the collateralized NFT. And then that's an input into the financial model, and it helps calculate the expected value of the loan to help us construct that portfolio.
There's anything you guys want to add about the protocol itself? Is there anything you think we maybe didn't touch on or you'd like to highlight a little bit more?
We kind of captured most of it.
Okay, cool. Let's zoom out a bit. And this is something we tend to ask most of the guests on the show, but where do you guys see NFT financialization today? And where do you see kind of the market migrating over the next year or so?
So I think we're very early in the NFT financialization space. We kind of have an internal thesis about NFTs serving as the financial primitive of the metaverse. And that just has to do with the fact that you're able to store, in some respects, more information when it comes to NFTs, because there is less standardization required versus a fungible token system. The biggest problem with NFT financialization that we see right now is liquidity. And that's a big reason why we're building what we're building. We had a bunch of ideas about what we could build into NFT financialization, but the first step before any of that can really take place is there just needs to be liquidity flooding left and right, covering all the various asset classes within the NFT financialization space. So it's definitely an exciting time to be playing. It's very early, and I think we're about to see some exponential growth take place.
Dylan, Neon, anything you guys want to add on that?
Currently, the space is just generally very experimental. It's very fun to play around with NFT finance when the NFTs are arts and collectibles. It kind of makes it difficult to our earlier points to appraise them, assign them the correct expected value, all this stuff. And I think that really the direction of NFT finance and NFTs in general are going to go a little bit more into representative assets. So tokenization of real world assets, as well as maybe into the GameFi sector as well, are two areas that we're looking very heavily into. The reason why is because NFTs right now, a lot of people don't understand them because they kind of lack both financial utility as well as just utility as you would think of it in the traditional sense. And the bringing of these assets on chain to some respect pushes this utility into the space, and as such just makes everything a lot easier to price, and it just makes things a lot more composable and a lot more tangible to a lot more people. Liquidity will get pumped into the space in that way, and it seems like this is the direction that we think that the space is going to go as well.
When I'm thinking generally about the market, I see it kind of bifurcated into really what I would say kind of your blue chips and your longer tail assets. Let's just say the market crashes. I think that's the one risk that as a lender myself, one risk I can't control. How would you guys think about navigating the next year or so under very constrained scenario?
I think for what it's worth, I don't think we're necessarily worried about a crash. Not that it's not going to happen, but the impact that a crash will have on the NFT financialization space, I think, is probably overstated. That has to do with the fact that NFTs as a whole have a good amount of capital tied up in them, multiple billions of dollars, and the actual high-level financial structures and derivatives that are built on top of NFTs are just starting to come out. And regardless of whether the NFTs do a negative 80, negative 90%, there's still a good amount of untapped capital that's just really not being utilized effectively. Maybe if that crash would be a multi-year crash, there'd be some more concern on our end. Another thing to kind of keep in mind is as NFTs start moving toward more utility type NFTs, Dylan kind of mentioned the GameFi space a little bit, as well as just representing real world assets. I think the impact of crashes upon blue chips and collectible NFTs will not necessarily impact those three others that I mentioned a second ago.
So I've got one that is going to be completely irrelevant, a complete curveball for you guys. Dylan, you know what's coming? The Twitter profile pic. What's the workout regimen?
that profile picture's actually gotten me a lot of good flack, to be honest. So I used to swim back in the day. So a lot of like my base muscle layer was from swimming. And I kind of transitioned that from swimming into more lifting. I guess in general, I run a PPL workout schedule. Which
I mean, that's completely obvious. Like it's like the chest is, you're jacked.
Oh my God. I try to work out. Honestly, as I've gotten older, I've transitioned working out more so as something to do in and of itself, just to get jacked or just to get strong, but more so just to kind of keep me grounded and more just mentally sharp. Working out is very good for you in terms of just getting oxygen into your brain, having some time to relax, having some time to think. And then, every so often you can snap a pic for your Twitter, your Twitter profile, or maybe if you've got enough balls, your LinkedIn profile. But maybe one day I'll do that.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you got to throw that on the LinkedIn for sure. No, actually, you brought up like a really interesting angle I think we can go down that I've, experienced myself is you're building a platform. What are some of the challenges like as early stage founders that you guys face? And what are some of the things you do to, at least, for me, myself, like I've found historically, like you could get like super stressed out. And a lot of the times I'm also so interested in the subject that whatever I'm building or helping build, I spend a lot of time just focusing on it. How do you guys like unplug and kind of navigate that aspect of the founder's lifestyle?
Obviously, as a founder, you're dealing with a lot of just unknowns. There's a large mix of things that you're doing all the time. There's never really time that you're getting off because as a founder, you tend to think of your work as your life. We're all very aware that that can begin to creep into, mental health and just being able to stay grounded and stay driven for long periods of time. And the two things that I kind of do myself and I recommend to most people, the first is meditation. I think everyone on our team is consistently meditating. It really helps kind of take those 15 to 30 minutes out of the day where you're not only thinking about NFT financialization. The second thing is really, I do try to carve out 30 minutes before I go to sleep, just reading time and not reading about NFT financialization, but about other subjects. So philosophy is kind of my go-to. Just having those two consistently kind of give you the breathing room necessary to consider to just work longer, I'd say.
From my perspective, our team, we're all very close friends outside of just the work that we do. So it's kind of it makes working feel more so like a hobby than it is a job, which I guess is something that I value a lot as a founder. This is kind of the reason why I wanted to go into founding as opposed to continuing my 9-to-5. Also, something that a framework that I've been keeping in my head within these past couple of years is I think that work-life balance should be analyzed within specific timescales. So I think a lot of people, when they talk about work-life balance, they often analyze work-life balance within the span of a day or maybe half a day. What I'm trying to get at is that perhaps a better way to look at work-life balance is in longer timescales. So this is something that I've personally been thinking about a lot, and it's brought a lot of comfort into how I live my life immediately. If you look at my life right now, it's pretty unbalanced when you look at work-life balance within the span of a single day. But when you spread it more so into the span of a week or a month, or even at the highest level to the span of your career or your life, the idea is that you should optimize for how hard you work within a specific range of time throughout a longer time cycle, such that it's more so sprints when you need to and relaxation when you can, as opposed to forcing yourself to relax and sprints within specific time frames that everybody else wants you to do.
How can people contribute to Spice? Like, how can people contribute? How can people learn more? How can people help with the vision? What do you guys have as sort of like these ending notes?
So we're going to be opening up a Discord, I think, in a month or two from now. That's going to be probably the easiest way where we're going to have a bunch of ideas about where we can best get help. I'd say just spreading the word around. If you have some crazy ideas, if you're smart thinking about the space, definitely reach out to us. We love hopping on calls and just getting people plugged in, as well as kind of sharing value between each other. We're very open guys and we love just talking with smart people. So just reach out to us if you have any ideas.
And where can they reach you at?
Either our main Twitter at @spice_finance and or our personal Twitters. I kind of already said mine, but it's at @Ugwe_DeFi.
I'm at Dylan DUYGU. Dylan is DYLAN. And don't get intimidated by my profile picture if that's even in the question. I'm a pretty chill guy. Try to stay funny, but I thought it'd be good for the memes.
I think it's hilarious. It's pretty funny. So
it sourced me some good VC deals, surprisingly. So that'd be something.
You won't find it on my profile pic. You would get a much different image than yours. So, all right, guys, I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
All right. Thank you.